You on my left or
That's for you for the next
Okay.
meeting.
Next meeting.
Yes, so I don't have to go to your house.
Oh, come on, come visit.
I'll see you in the house. No problem. Thank you for coming. We are live streamed, just to let you know.
Next meeting. Okay. Minutes are open, okay. Ow. Is this mine or yours? Oh, doesn't matter.
That was on a super trip. I know. I have every piece here.
I only need one space, it's okay. You've got a lot of stuff to juggle now. You need to work on those graphics, more interactive. Those file, like PowerPoint presentations. It's nothing hard. I show you how to do that stuff. It's easy. Yeah. You get some animations in there.
Okay, it's 7:30. My computer says 7:30.
It's 7:28.
I have 7:28.
I have 7:29.
My computer says 7:30.
Somewhere about then.
Can you make it say 9:30?
Yeah.
Somewhere over
So
the
you just have to
Atlantic.
be 10:30 because that's the time I got home last night.
Okay.
10:30.
From how far back?
Remember? So it was a 3-hour kind of work. So that's your over under.
Yeah. It's less than that.
So,
Bless you. Bless you.
Right, I think we're good. 7:30. Right, good evening, everyone. This is the Village of Warwick Planning Board meeting, October 8th, 2024. First thing we'll do is stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sandy, roll call.
Jesse Gallo,
Here.
Brian Barber,
Here.
Carrie Boland,
Here.
Scott Brown,
Here.
Bill Olson.
Here.
Vanessa Holland,
Here.
Elizabeth Cassidy,
Here.
and Keith Woodruff.
Here.
Okay. First item is the acceptance of the board minutes from our last meeting, which is September 10th, 2024.
Move to accept the minutes from September 10th.
Second.
Carrie, I guess we'll go with Carrie. It's almost a tie. All in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain because I wasn't here.
All right. First application on the agenda is yesterday's amended site plan review.
Just want to state for the record, due to the conflict of interest as we represented the applicant on a previous application to the planning board, we're going to recuse ourselves from reviewing any of the application.
I think
I'm Jason, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable sitting here. If you want to come up, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, why don't you come up that way, we can look at plans and things of that nature. If you just want to introduce yourself, just.
Sure, I'm Jason Pittengaro from Pittengaro and Doge Engineers. Asked to be alternate review engineer for this project. We're working with the village on a couple other projects. And I think out of convenience, since I live in town, I was asked to do this.
Great, all right. Welcome. All right, so.
Elizabeth.
Want to give us, I guess, an overview of your proposal here?
Yes.
Introductions, I guess.
Yep.
I know.
Okay, obviously I'm John Christensen from yesterday's. I was trying to keep the trailers where they are.
Yeah, so right now there's three
Three,
storage trailers.
okay, and this is the first time I'm hearing that technically they're in the flood zone. Every conversation I had with Boris, he just wanted them gone. I didn't realize till I got the paperwork from the village they're in the flood zone. So I have no problem moving them out of the flood zone. There's plenty of room on the property to take them out of the flood zone. The reason I have various restaurant equipment in there, I'm purging them out slowly but surely to get rid of them. I'd like to get rid of them altogether, but I may need to keep one for storage. So there's plenty of property around, all the way around here that I can move them to relatively easy and be done with it.
This would be out of the flood zone or something.
Yeah.
High area.
All right, so that was one item, and then I think you had two others, right?
Yes, we had the original planting, we're changing that. Okay, my landscape is ready to start on that as soon as I get it okay from the board that the new plantings are acceptable.
And then there was another with the.
And then they came to the conclusion of not blacking top the exit type of thing because the ground should be porous. If you blacktop it, the water runoff will get to the stream we cut through blacktop. So there was discussion of using either millings or the crushed concrete or bluestone type of on the way out from the part that's already paved like this. I believe the engineer suggested it being 25 feet wide. There's more than enough room to make it 25 feet wide. That's not a major issue on my end, because I believe it's 20. He would like, the engineer over here would like it 25 feet. There's plenty of property to make it 25 feet out. The fire company already gave a letter to Boris that right now it's accessible for the fire trucks to get in and out. Boris has that letter.
Liz, did you want to go through some of your comments?
The property is located in the LI zoning district. The application is not subject to general municipal law 239. The planning board to evaluate whether a public hearing should be held on the amendments pursuant to section 145-96. This is an unlisted action pursuant to seeker. The application to be referred to the architectural review board pursuant to section 5-4 of the village code. The property is not located in the historic district. It does not appear, the project is subject to review by the AHDRB pursuant to 145-24. The site has been approved as an eating, drinking establishment subject to use group K on the bulk table, see below. Any use not identified on the use table shall be deemed prohibited, see section 145-32D. An accessory use is a building, structure, or use which is clearly incidental or subordinate to and customarily used in connection with the principal building, structure, or use, and which is located on the same lot with the principal building, structure, or use. I note that 145-91 I8H provides that outdoor storage shall be prohibited. The building inspector should issue a determination as to whether the proposed storage is outdoor storage prohibited under the code. In the event the application is determined not to be prohibited outdoor storage, the applicant to demonstrate the proposed storage is incidental to eating and drinking principal use already on lot. The code specifically finds that portable temporary storage containers shall not be considered temporary structures. See section 145-181, and I've included the definition. Applicant to address screening requirements for the proposed storage units. I draw the board's attention to the following provisions of the code. Section 145-70C3, buffering of parking lots adjacent to residents if applicable shall be accomplished through landscaping sufficient to screen nuisance characteristics of parking such as headlights, noise, use of cars. 145-91 I2, site plans involving non-residential uses proposed adjacent to residential district or residential uses shall be reviewed with regard to the impact of the development on such district or use. The planning board shall encourage the use of a combination of landscaping, buffers, berms, screens, visual interruptions, and common building materials to create attractive transitions between buildings of different architectural styles and uses. See also 145-91 I8E, landscaping shall be used to create boundaries and transitions between areas of differing development intensities, as well as to separate areas of incompatible land uses. A buffer zone thickly planted with native trees and shrubs of sufficient width to entirely screen a non-residential use from a neighboring residential use shall be required. 2 of the storage containers appear to be located in the front yard. This appears to be in violation of section 145-50 and 145-51, as it is not an accessory use which is permitted in the front yard. A 100-year floodplain. The instant application is subject to a permit pursuant to chapter 69, section 4.2. I refer the board to sections 5.1-2, 5.2, and 5.4 for construction standards. I defer to your engineer as to whether the proposal conforms to those standards. I do not believe it does.
Is there any questions from the board on council's comments?
This might be a question for the engineer a second. I just want to check where the floodplain is located, but that might be,
I think there's a line.
is that, I can't see the line here.
It's the little,
It's this squiggly.
This line here.
Yeah.
That's the flood, okay.
essentially the building is what it is because
Yeah.
it was the only place
Yep,
not in the
right.
floodplain.
So that's the 100-year floodplain, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So all this is there, okay?
I think it's important just to distinguish too, there's a floodplain and then a floodway.
Right.
And right now, the containers are located within the floodway, so
Right.
that's an area that's not only subject to flooding, but could be channelized as well.
Right.
Flood.
And the floodway line is where?
Brian, do you
It's
want
not-
to?
That's, that on the map?
The floodway is not on just the floodplain, it's on this map.
It's on the original map, I believe it
One of
cruises
these.
somewhere through here.
Yes, I don't have it
So-
on this plan.
I don't know if you want to look, if you
Should the
want.
floodway be indicated on this map?
Oh, yeah.
Yep,
I would
okay.
say so. I mean, it's relative, but
Yep.
if they're gonna move it out of there, maybe it's not quite as relative.
But
if
it'd probably be
you-
good to have it.
Yeah, it's on this map here, if you can see, it's this dash dot line here.
Right, so it looks like at least one,
Yes,
if not
so-
2, are in that
Floodway,
location now.
okay.
Okay, did anybody else have any comments for Liz, or any clarifications on any of her comments? And you have an exhaustive list here.
Yeah,
Some of
I
your
mean,
comments.
I don't think it's I usually wouldn't go through all the comments. A lot of them pertain to bringing aspects of the current site to compliance with the prior approval, or
Right.
you'd have to amend the prior approval for this amendment to include those modifications.
Right.
But in the matter that's currently before the board, I think those containers have to be moved for certain, and you have to determine what the impact is if they're placed up there. And as Liz mentioned, I'm not sure, I think it's Boris's determination as to what the front yard would be, but I would assume that this is considered in the front yard here if it's bordering the street.
No, it's not.
No, I don't, how did you guys determine it the first time? And listen,
No,
I'm,
no, but I mean, technically, this is a house in here.
okay.
So this is technically the entranceway.
So what I would advise is whatever you had determined on the first application in terms of front yard, rear yard, side yards, is just to apply that again and just, you
Yeah.
know, as,
Because there's a house here, in here located, and this house goes all the way to here. The only access I have is 55 feet in the front here entranceway.
I will check the definition of the code, but traditionally, the front yard is defined as from the principal building forward to the street line.
Right.
So the point of the front yard is that the two structures are located in between the building.
No, I'm not talking about these. I'll get rid of them altogether, I'll move them over to here.
But what I think Liz is saying is that this might be considered front yard as well, because this is the structure. So anything from the structure to the road would be considered front yard. So you almost draw a line here and say nothing can be on this side. But we would need more clarification on that for sure.
and frankly, I mean, if you're looking to move it out of the floodplain as well, you know, just from your own perspective, this might not be the best place to put it. This, you know, it is obviously in closer proximity to the adjoiners, but that is maybe a better location for it, because it's more.
But it's closer to the
uneven
neighbors,
there,
there's
for
neighbors
sure.
right next to it.
Yeah, and the topography doesn't really,
No, it doesn't.
but it could be set maybe in a sideways orientation, like a stepped, but, again, that's only if that is how you determine or establish that front yard there.
I guess from my perspective, I'd like clarity on a temporary structure versus, because I think you had a question on that.
Oh, well,
Temporary
I
versus-
think per the code, anything that's, I don't know, I went and seen the site, obviously, you know, it's a restaurant in town where you live, right, so you've been there anyway. But, they're sea containers, so I don't know, I consider those a temporary structure. And I think as long as you put a time limit on how long they're going to be there, and I think you've indicated that they're not something that you plan to keep forever.
No.
You're phasing out certain things.
There was a fourth one, I purged that one out and got rid of that one.
Okay.
This one is almost empty, and either I could move it out of the way and use it to store stuff in it. If it's easier just to get rid of them, that's fine by me.
But the fact is that anything over 30 days requires a building permit, so that's why they were before Boris.
Any other questions for the engineer?
Well, I mean, why is this area not acceptable? This is not the front yard? But
Well-
it's a better location than this, for sure.
But it might be considered a front yard.
But is it considered front yard? Right.
That's, we need clarity
On
from
that.
Give me one-
the code for that. But before that, we need a proposal that shows something where they propose to put the
True,
structures.
true.
We're not gonna decide where they go.
With landscaping, I don't have, there was landscaping put here, I don't have it on this map. Is there a what's the landscaping
Yeah,
now?
it's- Plans.
Lot map here.
There's, I know there are a bunch of trees put in, but we're, you know.
Yep.
Yeah,
200 some odd trees went all the way,
Fencing.
all the way along here
Yeah,
and there.
here, right,
Yeah. And they planted one and then the alternate.
yeah.
I think a lot of your questions were maybe a comparison of what the previous site plan and
Sure.
just what the current conditions are.
Sure, so it appears, and I wasn't present or part of the original review, but it appears that that review was pretty exhaustive and had a number of conditions. And in seeking the CO, I think making sure that those conditions were either met or that you're going to amend the current approval to remove those conditions or those site design elements. Otherwise, you're kind of approving something that is not in compliance with what you had approved previously.
Right, so I think we would need a site plan that shows what the differences are and what they propose to change or keep versus what they propose to
Yeah.
remediate.
Yeah, I think I've highlighted what I believe is different. I have visited the site a couple of times from like an engineering perspective, let's say too, beyond just the patron perspective. And that it was after we were asked to do this, and so those things are what's pointed out here. So I think it's clear what we considered a deviation from what was approved, what they intend to ask for relief from the original approval, or what they intend to do. I mean, that is, like you said, up to them as is where they place the container. Which plan are you looking for?
The additional trees that we put along the property lines.
I think just the landscaping plan is.
This is the supplemental screening plan, is this?
Yeah, that might have come separately.
This was provided by the landscape architect? I think is what you're looking for?
I don't know, this is an older one. Technically, we started trees here and went all the way down. No, let's go here. The trees are from here all the way down to this.
Right. And I think there's some other ones in here too.
Yes, there's a pile in here, but
Around
we put them along, the property lines along in here. And it's one row, and then there's another one on the offset.
Right.
I think it's approximately 200 and some odd trees.
Yeah, I remember.
It would be faster and easier, give me X amount of time and I'll get rid of the trailers altogether. How's that?
The best.
Okay? I'm trying to work with this and get rid of them, that's all.
Yeah, I think what we would need to continue is a site plan that shows exactly what the
Where you
proposed.
want to put them.
No,
Not where
no,
we want. We don't want to put them anywhere. They're,
I'll take 'em
they're
all
up to
off.
you.
I'll take them all off. I'll get rid of them. It's
Then
not
I would-
worth my time and effort to keep coming back and forth over the containers.
Right, so I would have that site plan amended to remove those. And then there's the two changes that you're requesting as far as the drive
The drive. Yeah.
and the plantings.
Right.
And then I guess any of the other items that you identify that differ from the original site plan to what exists currently. So I think the idea would be to review the engineer's letter, kind of go through all those comments,
Okay.
decide what needs to be changed, what doesn't need to be changed, what you would like to be amended on a site plan, show that on a site plan, and then we could further review.
Okay.
Are you acceptable with the planting, so the landscaper can start planting them?
Well, we can't approve anything until we review the entire application.
Okay?
We can't approve anything until the final.
In terms of the landscaping, I would suggest holding off because some of the items that we noted would affect the stormwater. So if that is not, if there's gonna be an amendment to the stormwater plan, that may affect those plantings because they're facilitating the stormwater management basin.
Well, to that point, the applicant is suggesting maybe riprap, not crushed stone. I think would that be? You think that'd be a good alternative to a pavement there?
I like I said, I have driven through there, and I think, and actually Brian and I had discussed this. I think that the material that is there is suitable for use in the floodway. It doesn't look like it's something that's going to be washed away. So in terms of that as an alternative, what I would suggest is that, and it's pretty evident when you drive through here that this 20-foot accessway, which you've agreed to make 25 foot, and I think that is appropriate because,
Yes, there's plenty of room to do it.
yeah, so I think that needs to be defined because you can see that there's gravel surface all over everywhere, and frankly, I think that, you know, that's not I don't know, I don't think that was the intent of how the site was to look in a permanent nature.
Originally, the entire was gonna be all blacktop.
Yep,
And then 7 years ago, blacktop was cheap.
sure, and I don't have any.
No, you know what I mean? It's- so
Yeah, and
we-
I don't have any objection to the alternative of the crushed stone or millings or whatever
Okay.
you're proposing. I'm just saying that the area that's not part of the driveway should be established as turf or some kind of other permanent installation, whether it's another planting area or, again,
Grass.
turf, grass, yes, whatever it may be.
Right.
Instead of just a-
defined path.
Yeah, well, yeah, just for aesthetics and more than anything else. And that was what was shown on the original as well.
Right. Yeah,
But-
there was
But
no-
that material, to me, it was acceptable in that area there. And if it's acceptable to the fire department in terms of apparatus and use, you know, until you get there and you try and turn a vehicle, I think you may not realize that 20 foot is not as wide and that turn there,
That's fine.
the radius is tighter, so I think the 25 foot is better. But yeah, the material is okay.
So all three will be gone, okay?
All right, are there any other questions, comments?
Not this time.
No? Liz, or for now?
So at this point, one of the board's functions is to evaluate whether a public hearing is needed. Given the applicant's representation that he wishes to remove the trailers, and I think we're just going down to the millings versus driveway, and then the changes to the landscaping. What I would suggest is we receive that, make a determination as to whether a public hearing is needed for that. Certainly, my comments as to architectural review and anything like that are no longer required if
Right.
if the containers are removed from the site.
Right.
And then we can evaluate, and on those the changes that the applicant wishes to keep, whether we need a public hearing, and then set the public hearing,
Right.
if we choose to go that route. But certainly the application becomes much smaller, if the containers are removed.
Right. I agree. Okay. Did you have any other questions other than what was outlined, I guess, in the two comment letters?
So then really you would just need from us is just an amended site plan showing
Yep.
the 25
Yeah, compare
foot.
what was originally approved, what is there today, and what changes you'd like to implement, and we've already discussed, obviously, the plantings and the path.
25 feet.
Yeah, the driveway there, and then whatever other discrepancies there are between the two, evaluate whether you suggest or would like to keep them as is, or you're gonna remedy them to what is approved in the site plan.
Okay.
And Brian, in your next submission, if you could provide a seeker consistency, you know, a letter detailing the consistency with the prior seeker determination
Okay.
of what you're proposing, so that we can look at it that way.
Okay. All right.
I don't necessarily want to reinvent seeker if there's been findings, and if you can outline what you believe are what's consistent and or better, or, you know, we can
Okay.
use that as a basis.
Okay.
You good?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
This is yours.
Oh, yep. Kristen, those are ours, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Second item on the agenda is 19 Poplar Street's site plan review. site plan?
Yeah, I
got one
look
here?
at it. But you got it.
There haven't been any changes since when you
No,
submitted?
since
Oh,
the 12th of September.
well, there was something. You want to just give us a little
So, yeah,
background?
before we moved to Warwick, a place we're really happy to live in, we actually, we looked at this house. And out in the back of the house, there's an existing deck. And it goes beyond where we were imagining, maybe adding a little space. So we discussed it. We stopped in here actually, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, looks good.
Before we made an offer on the house.
Before we made an
yeah.
offer on the house. And then we did. And then we started up the process. We, found an architect and a builder, and started the process, and then applied. And then we're denied. We're not professionals in this regard. I'm not an engineer. I'm a retired school teacher. She's a social worker. I don't fully understand, other than sort of what I was given to believe, which is that, gosh, the garage goes beyond anywhere we were planning to go, and and we're sort of tucked in the corner of this relatively large lot for the village, and the existing deck goes beyond. And so what we're proposing is a pretty modest little,
And yeah, so, and just the summary is that it's about a 400 square foot, one-story addition. Just to give us some more space on the ground floor, we have the beautiful privilege of both having our moms alive and senior living in the area. And we just want them to be able to come over, and part of the addition involves like a bathroom that they can use, because right now it's just a tiny half bath on the ground. It's a typical little tiny colonial.
Functional.
And it involves a family room, a laundry room, so we can get the washer and dryer out of the kitchen, and what is,
So we
should
can
be
have
our kitchen pantry.
have our pantry back.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's just, we're just hoping to be able to create a more comfortable living space on the ground level for ourselves.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. Liz, you want to go through some
Sure.
plans?
The property is located in the R zoning district. The property obtained area variances from the zoning board of appeals on August 27th, 2024, with the decision dated September 5th, 2024. The conditions of the variance should be incorporated into any approval. The application is not subject to GML 239. I do note the comments of Keith Woodruff. I misspelled his name. Dated October 1, 2024. That's embarrassing. A public hearing, unfortunately, is required. This is one of, we've had a couple of these lately, and I see a trustee is in the room, so he might take notes. Where, yes, I know you just had a ZBA public hearing, you have to have one with us. The applicant shall mail notice of public hearing at least 10 days before to property owners within 300 feet. This is a type 2 action under seeker, so no further environmental review is required. We did receive an AAF, but it's a residential development, so that's fine. My one nitpick is the application and site plan need to be updated to reflect use group B. The map and application show P, which I can understand the confusion is for permitted use. But the use group under our code is B. It appears that the lot meets all of that, so the variances they got covers them under use group B.
Is that something that we ask our,
Yep.
Mr. McLean for? Okay.
Yeah. So
There's one
just more
very small,
administrative,
there's
yeah.
one small difference, but you meet that setback, so I'm not worried about it. It's just, it's an error, and that's a small correction. So my recommended action tonight would be to set a public hearing.
May I just ask, and I totally respect the process, and we're really happy that you take such care in making sure that any additions or any changes are done with a lot
We come
of
from
thought.
Monroe.
We come from
So,
Monroe.
so we're happy with the regulations.
We just, since we did it with the zoning board and no one showed up at the meeting, that doesn't,
Unfortunately not, this is
Okay.
a statutory requirement, so that the board doesn't have authority to waive or It certainly, we've had discussions with the trustees, and again, I'm putting the trustee McKnight on the spot, that it's, that the village isn't part of its comprehensive plan and rezoning efforts, and that may be something we consider as part of this process, whether a public hearing can be either waived or held jointly. It is tough to get two boards together. You are not, I think this is the third or fourth ZBA application where we've had
In
a
2
double.
months.
Yeah. So, we recognize the issue, but unfortunately it is statutory, so, the board has to, we have to go through that process even if no one
Okay.
comes.
And could we ask, could it be the November meeting? Because we're very quick at being able to get letters out, and, because our builder, who's Dave Waglam, said that, you know, if, particularly with the weather having been so mild, he thinks that we could probably break ground before the winter, you know, if we can move ahead by November.
You're not subject to 239, so I don't have a 30-day issue.
Right.
And we can easily set the public hearing, and I can get Kristen a public notice later this week if that meets with the board's agenda.
Are there any modifications to the plan required before the public hearing?
They are-
Nothing's, well, we'll go through Keith's comments too.
It was it's a de minimis, you know, correction that has no impact on what the public sees. It's not it's a typo,
Right.
effectively.
A quick question, Liz. I'm just quickly going through the ZBA. So they gave them a variance on the side yard setback? Okay, that's because it's only 9. Okay, so that's what it says here.
Right.
Okay, so that's, I think, the major problem, right? ZBA?
But they've solved that,
Right.
that problem, and my change doesn't affect, I just wanna be clear that my change doesn't affect the ZBA's determination. It's not like a oops, they got the wrong variance from the ZBA. They
Okay,
just
they got
cited
that,
the
okay.
wrong group. I did go through,
Okay.
and actually, if you notice, the ZBA, Ashley Torrey does a very nice job. She cited use group B, so she cited the correct use group.
Okay, all right. But the major variance that was granted.
The variances
was the site
match what we
distance.
need, yes.
That's okay.
Keith, did you want to go through your comments?
Yeah, so I didn't really have much. It was more of applicant to verify if the improvements will impact the existing water and sewer. I know there's a valve in the front of the building. I don't know if the water and sewer or anything goes around the back of it, so just once the foundation is under construction, just make sure it's not going to be impacted for that. Does the existing garage have any water or sewer services run to it? Okay, so that's fine. The existing porch on the front of the property is a pre-existing non-conformity for the front yard setback. So just provide some dimensions on it, just to memorialize as far as what the setbacks are. So if anything, we have some kind of documented evidence as to what it was.
Can we do
Is
that
that
ourselves,
something-
or do we need to like?
No,
Should we get
unfortunately,
John
you can't
White
make
to-
any.
okay.
You can have John make manual changes, but you need by law to have his approval to be able to do any kind of modifications to it.
Okay.
Okay, so.
And then updating the bulk requirements. So what Liz alluded to as far as the use group, that's also going to have to change as far as the bulk requirements. And then provide the updated front yard setback that would be basically from the property line to the front porch.
And what I would recommend, because of the nature of the changes, these are small technical homework changes, I call them. I would not make them at this point. I would await the public hearing, any final discussions, and ask John, essentially,
Do it all
find
at
everything
once.
else and give John a homework list all at once, so he's not doing it twice.
Let me make sure I understand what you're saying. So you're saying that would happen after, so just
Wait,
temporarily?
wait, so-
that would
We'd
be
have the public,
after
we'd have the
public-
public hearing,
Okay.
the board would have its discussion, we would finalize our discussion, then you can go take what, I don't wanna call it a laundry list to scare you, but the list of handful of items that need to be addressed, and you hand John a list once, not hand it to him twice.
Okay.
Great. So then I guess the other side of that question is, what would we bring to the public hearing?
The public would review what's already been
The
presented.
existing.
Yep.
At this point, I'm of the belief unless the plan is sufficient for public review, given the nature of the application, those changes would be a condition of any approval, so that John knows what the final list of, because I would hate for you to go make a change and then us find one
And
other
then-
little thing, and then John has to touch it again and bill you again, so
Yeah,
we're
yes.
trying to streamline
True.
it.
Would you be able to, without, I know certainly without any commitments, but if everything were to go smoothly, so we have a sense of timing, what would we expect then from the public hearing and then the changes, you know, what the timing would kind of be with all that, to the final approval, where we could go ahead?
Generally, I know
Makes sense.
similar applications that we've had recently, it's been pretty quick, so it's, I mean, there is a possibility that we could have the public hearing, close the public hearing,
And you could approve it that night.
approve it that night. So,
I won't
Without,
guarantee-
John, without the piece that John.
Correct.
it would be conditions on.
And then-
Condition on that, okay.
Yeah, so
And then-
before a permit is issued for a building permit, you'd have to have all those changes made, they'd have to be reviewed by both the Liz and Keith, and then they'd be able to authorize the signature, and then you'd be able to get it up.
So it won't turn around in one day right after
No.
you get
No,
the
that-
approval,
that-
you
but-
understand.
A few days.
But a couple
Infer
of
that.
weeks, you know, by the, you have your approval, however long it takes John, and then theoretically, you know, it's gonna take, you know, Keith a day or two to review, you know, when we get the final plans, it takes us a couple of days to review. So I'd say a couple of weeks after, but
Okay. And is the meeting the one that's the planning board that would be in November then? That we're
Yes.
talking about the public hearing, is that
Yeah.
in and of the same?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I think the second Tuesday of the month.
okay.
If you're ready, I'll move that we schedule a public hearing on November 12th.
I'll second.
Alright, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so public hearing is November 12th.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Alright, next on the agenda is 15 Elm Feed and Grain floodplain application public hearing.
I'm Joey Racy, architect, owner of 15 Grain. Here's the whole papers. Here's the mailings. Pretty happy, don't hurt yourself.
Okay, well, thank you.
Before we get to the public hearing, I know we have, wanna go over this, I guess, with some of your comments? Yeah.
I actually didn't have new comments on this one. I see that the applicant has submitted the mailings, and we have the proof of publication.
You just captured fires.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they were just a carryover from last meeting.
The date changes on my memo. It's like, I have to fix
Yeah,
that.
you have to fix that.
It auto, you know, that
It
auto
auto-
feature,
Yeah.
and then if you don't catch it, I didn't write a memo?
Keith, did you had some,
It was just a carryover of three previous comments. The first was the applicant submitted revised plans, which he has before you, which made the changes that were requested at the last meeting. My first comment was just to have them on a full-size sheet, which he's provided here at the meeting, just so that it makes it easier to kind of see all the details in the plans. The second item is to see if the board would determine as the floodplain administrator if a elevation certificate would be required or should be requested of the existing residents.
Nice, okay.
That's typically something as a floodplain administrators that they can, not necessarily enforce, but request that the applicant provides an elevation certificate, which is basically determining that there is no mechanicals and that what the first floor elevation is. So in the event of a flood, there's documented evidence as to what could potentially be the loss of the building. It's typically required when you have flood insurance, or when you're in a floodplain, any kind of structures, especially a residential structure, is required to provide for a flood insurance. I believe you said, I think at the last meeting, that you don't have flood insurance. So that's something that the floodplain administrator can request that they provide and keep a documented evidence of that can then be passed to the building inspector to keep on file.
it's just a question, so how would that, what,
It doesn't affect the application, it's more of just detailing what the potential loss could be, so because the structure is residential, with apartments, there could be potential for, if the mechanicals are below the floodplain elevation, that in the flood, the mechanicals could be damaged to a point where the residences are no longer habitable. Also, it determines what the actual bottom elevation is of the structure. So during a 100-year flood, will the water protrude into the building itself? So that's all typical. There's a whole calculation and a form that needs completed. It's usually requested or performed by an engineer, a surveyor. I'm not sure if an architect can do it or not, but it's more just having elevations and providing detailed evidence as to what is below that elevation. So if you have a crawl space, a full basement, mechanicals is a big thing. So if you have air handlers, your sewage.
Right. And that's typically for insurance purposes, though, right?
It is, but as a floodplain administrator, you can police that throughout the district. So that's something that you can request that properties provide to you, and not necessarily.
Right, and the applicant could say.
Yes, it's there's no requirement, but it could be something that could be contingent on the approval, and it would be something, and it's something we can discuss as part of the whole floodplain discussion at the end of the meeting. But that's something that should be kind of enforced as you proceed through the all the different floodplain applications, just so that you have a documented record as to what is there. Especially if the building inspector needs to go in and deem it uninhabitable or condemn the building or whatever it may be, he has documented evidence as to what could potentially be at fault.
Right. Okay.
And then the last item was if the board would make a condition of approval for request of an as-built survey of the property once the improvements have been completed, just so we can document what finalized map with the elevations and the berms and so forth.
Okay. Any questions from the board? All right. Someone would like to make a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. I will read the notice. Once I find it. There it is. All right. Village of Warwick Planning Board Notice of Public Hearing. Please take notice that the Village Planning Board, the Village of Warwick, will hold a public hearing at the Village of Warwick Village Hall, 77 Main Street, Warwick, New York, 10990, on October 8th, 2024 at 7:30 p.m. or soon thereafter as possible on the amended site plan application and floodplain development application of Feed and Grain LLC to allow for the importation of fill and landscaping within the floodplain at 15 Elm Street, 210-7-3. A copy of the application is available for review in the Building Planning Department located at 77 Main Street, Warwick, New York, 10990 during regular business hours by order of the Planning Board of the Village of Warwick, Jesse Gallo, Chairperson, dated September 13th, 2024. All right. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak? Okay, there are none.
I hear no comments from the public. I recommend we close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Okay, it's public hearing is officially closed. All right, Liz, I will ask what is next.
Okay. So going back to, I should have done this slightly better, my apologies. Going back to my prior memo, we did receive 239 review back from the county with an indication of local determination. There were a couple of comments on the EAF. We did receive an EAF this morning. I have not had an opportunity to review it. I don't think, Keith, you had an opportunity to review.
I never got a copy.
Okay.
It was received today,
Okay.
so it was not distributed.
So I'll have to make sure that those issues are addressed. Did we determine if the protection of what, Keith, did we determine if the protection of waters permit was needed?
I don't believe so, because he's not making any modifications to the streams, beds, or
Okay.
banks.
I threw it out there, but just wanted to double check.
Yep.
And then we removed the townhouses from the plan so that, that does not create a segmentation issue. And then I had noted that was lacking topographical data, and I'll defer to Keith whether there's sufficient topographical data on the plans.
He's provided spot elevations throughout here on the SK2 plan to show where the difference of elevations are on the driveway. He does have notation as to what the elevation is for each of these berms, being 519, whereby the floodplain I believe is 517. Yeah. So there is some information on the other plan. There is more where it kind of showed what used to be the pre-existing, where it had some of the buildings and so forth. So there is some topography here. It's not as built, so to speak, or current conditions, but there is, I think, sufficient information here for the board to kind of see the elevation differences pre versus post.
So I think based on your comment, we still would need to review the
We still need
revised
to get with the revised, well, we have it, I need to review it. What I would suggest is solicit comments of the board so that upon our review, we can incorporate comments into it in a proposed resolution for next month's meeting.
By the way, it's the same short form I submitted almost 2 months ago. There was a typo on it. I said 9,000 square feet on the application and 10,000 on, I said 9,000 on this, but 10,000 on the other application of land that I was covering. So it was just this one thing that I initialed. Everything else is exactly the same. So that's why I thought it was just kind of a typo.
Well, there were more comments than that. The applicant to utilize the New York State DEC EAF mapping tool. Applicant to address the impacts of proposed grading on Wayanda Creek, Indiana Bat, and I appreciate that sometimes these are de minimis impacts, but it does trigger a yes answer. So as a board, we have to address the yes response. The square feet of disturbance was one typo, and then also it was listed in a critical environmental area. So I want to make so with respect to that, we do require the DEC mapping tool because it provides it, and then again the impacts of.
So right now we don't have a complete EAF,
Correct.
essentially.
Okay.
Right, so we can't process it any further until we receive that.
And it has to be 3 weeks, received 3 weeks before the meeting.
Right, so
For you to be
essentially
able to
next
review
week.
it, that's why I can't distribute it to you on the day of the meeting.
It wasn't complete anyway, but yes.
Yeah, it was,
Right,
right.
so we'll need those addressed with sufficient time to Kristen to put them on the next agenda. But it sounds like once we have that,
I don't
Okay, review.
anticipate significant issues, but we need to at least as a requirement to take a hard look under seeker. And I appreciate there were prior, this project has already received prior approvals, and maybe there was a discussion from the prior approval, again, new here, so we might review that as well. And be able to make a consistency finding with your prior seeker determination that way. But again, we have a form that says it, and we just, anytime there's a yes answer, there has to be at least some response.
Okay, can we agree that there is no impact on the Wabianda Creek? As you just mentioned, and they take one of these off the to-do list?
Well, I can't say that as the attorney.
but it still needs to be
it
We
needs
have
to
to
be
go through the
about.
form, right? And
Right,
then
we have a
to-
form that says
right.
yes, it,
So it's gonna trigger the yes response in the form, and then that requires us to then assess whether it has an impact or
Correct.
not. So we can't, I know as silly as it sounds, we need the form
Form on the.
to start that process, yeah.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right, so I'll update this and get it to you.
and,
Yeah,
and
with the
perhaps,
mapper.
perhaps we
So
go
the
back
mapping too,
to,
that's a yes.
perhaps we go back to your original site plan approval and the seeker determination. And Kristen, if you could pull that for me, that would be great.
Yeah, I have all that too.
Because theoretically, nothing has
It,
changed.
theoretically, there was some discussion, often with the Indiana bat, it's a limitation on,
Yeah, time of year.
or a simple
tree cutting.
state, I've often seen simple statement, we're not clearing the site, so the impact on the Indiana bat is minimal.
Mhm.
I can't write that. You can write that. A birds and bees guys can write that.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's no trees or bushes being removed, I'm adding all of that.
Give us, that's what I'm suggesting, is give us that statement.
Right. So we might attract the bats to come to my property.
Keith, did we say that the fill had any impact?
To the floodplain?
Yeah.
No, only because of the previous building
Right.
was in the same
Okay.
vicinity.
I-
So the previous mapping was performed while the building was there, the building was thus removed, and he's put fill
So-
in its place.
It's
So there's
actually
no additional
lesser of
impact.
an impact, correct?
Yes,
Yeah, we've removed, the previous owner and myself removed about 18,000 square feet of buildings.
Right.
And this berm is about 10,000 square feet, the two berms.
Right.
So it's a lot less, and that was all impervious under the building and the building itself. So we've made it better, and the new fill is permeable.
You said you received comments from the county on this project?
It was not much. Local determination, it was one sentence.
Oh, okay. Oh, wait, oh, we received that one too. Okay, that was more dramatic.
It's more
Okay,
of a
thanks.
response than.
It was
Okay,
a,
right. All right, good.
it's a we have no comment,
Yeah.
local determination.
All right.
We talked briefly last time about adding fill in a floodplain is a little bit worrisome to imagine the impacts. Maybe we can imagine more now, given the news from the south, what that looks like. If you'd hate to have your fill end up downstream somewhere. But you talked about the landscaping and the vegetation.
Mhm.
And the only concern I had was just to maybe pay particular attention to planting there in a way that would help keep your fill there if the water comes up.
Right, well, it's all vegetated already, just from natural growth.
Yep.
Yeah, and FEMA doesn't stop you from filling the land in a floodplain. So it's a good way to kind of reclaim your land if it's legal and allowed to be done, rather than be a hole. And also the type of land that I was dealing with was all kind of railroad bed and solid rock of years of they use it as basically a train yard, and I couldn't grow anything on it, so 4 feet of dirt gave me plenty of base to plant trees and everything else.
Trees, okay.
So that's what I'm thinking, it's more of a landscaping thing.
Should look nice.
It already looks better just by filling in and covering all that gravel and foundations. It looks better. So let me ask you this other thing. So the DEC was contacted. They called Boris. Boris came over and we met with him. And I don't know if they've ever actually come here. So when you say they're a likely agency, are they or are they not involved in this right now?
Based on what Keith just said, he does not believe that we need a protection of waters permit, so no,
Okay, so this would be a no.
that's a done.
I fixed the 10,000 square foot
So that's
typo.
a done.
And so the last thing is the site is
Yeah.
not located. And that's a yes. The back thing is a yes.
I'll find it. I think I would know this form by now.
Critical environmental area.
Yes, here. Critical environmental area is a defined term. There's
Okay.
only one in Orange County, it's Greenwood Lake.
Okay, I see.
So that's a no.
Okay, so that's a no. That's a better than a yes. Okay.
It's like a heritage area, you know, where there's legislation that this is a special area that you have to take additional consideration. So we don't have very many in Orange County.
Okay. Sounds good.
And none in the town of well, none in this part of the town, so.
All right, we'll update this. I got it to you within 3 weeks before the next meeting, and we'll keep letting our burn grow.
Yep, yeah, let the things grow.
That's it.
Yeah, no,
You want these more, Steve, or-
no, it's fine.
See you in a month.
Okay, thank you. Okay, take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Take care.
So the last application.
I don't know if you help or hinder.
Last application on the agenda is Village View.
I am recusing myself on this one.
And this is a site plan extension. Or
Yeah.
Conditional.
So keep it simple, but I figured I'll show the board some maps just so you have an idea of one of the things that's going on. Village View Cluster Subdivision has conditional approval from the board. And you have to go get agency approvals, DEC and Board of Health for water and sewer extensions. The applicant, Rob Silver, is kind of preoccupied with a project in Plattekill, so he hasn't really been, trying to push this too much. And also in the background, for those of you that were on the board at the time, you may recall we had some preliminary discussions with the village board regarding possibly putting a water tower on land in the town that's owned by Village View. Doing that would benefit everybody. But at the time, between the monies and the timing of how long that would take, it wasn't in the cards. We've revisited that. I've met with Trustee Cheney and Mayor Newhard, and I think everybody wants to try to make this happen. I'm supposed to meet with them again in the next week or so, I guess, for the client and the village to make the sausage, so to speak. So I gave you this map just to have an idea of what we're talking about. The green is Village View in the village. The yellow is the Marcy South power line. The pink X is the top of the hill where we'd potentially be putting a water storage tank in the town of Warwick. So while this plays its course in the background, which will obviously affect our water main extension application to the Board of Health, that's it.
What's the Marcy South?
That's the big transmission tower line that runs through the whole town.
Lines that go through here.
So what was the resolution of the wastewater treatment? It was going to be a pump station, or what happened?
So there's the existing Robin Bray pump
Right,
station
okay.
that's in need of, I guess it requires constant maintenance because the vessel that holds the sewage is small, makes the pumps jump on an awful lot, so the pump motors burn out. So we were going to replace that.
So
in
you
its
because
entirety.
that was the agreement with the village board.
There's a developer's agreement between the village
Okay.
board and the applicant.
And the site plan was that one of the conditions.
It's in the
Yeah,
conditions.
yeah, okay.
So that's,
So nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed in that
regarding our
regard.
site plan.
So this potential storage tank location, there's Valley View has a tower on it now. I don't know if you recall, some of the folks at Valley View already have water pressure issues and they were concerned about this. I believe that tank needs to be replaced. Right now it's in condition of needing replacement. And don't quote me on the village infrastructure, I'm just, getting old, my memory isn't what it is. But then there's the Chelsea Garden tanks too. I think there's some improvements there, or there was talk about adding
still
another
here.
one perhaps. And then we would need a booster pump station for our site because there's not enough pressure to reach the upper lots. It's a pretty extravagant booster pump because we have to provide fire flow So it's a 3-pump system, alternating pumps for domestic flow and then a big pump for fire flow. If we can put a storage tank up here, it eliminates all of those things.
Have you approached the town yet on this?
Yep.
Yeah, no, okay.
So the town is, so this layout you see, this concept subdivision in the town, again, I don't remember who all was on this board. This project goes back to 2004 for me, so 20 years. What a long road it's been.
I don't think any of us are.
I've been there.
But so as part, actually, it's because of Elizabeth brought up segmenting seeker that we prepared this concept of what could be done in the town. And we included this in the environmental impact statement.
Right.
And there is this town road, through road connection to the town, so that we can have more than 20 lots on a dead-end street and 2 ways in. That has been to the planning board as a site plan. I've done a site visit here with the planning board, Town of Warwick Planning Board. They obviously saw this in the EIS, FEIS, because they were an involved agency, but there has not been an application to the planning board. Having said that, I suspect if the village says, hey, we really like this, it can be a benefit to the village, and I don't see them having a problem with it, particularly given the fact that the view is already encumbered by the Marcy South power line. It's not like we're...
There's the building lot here, right?
On
Maybe,
this
maybe.
concept.
Yeah,
That's just the proposed.
the proposed.
Yeah, that's not a desirable building lot because it's on the other side of the Marcy South power line.
That's
So we would
true.
move that somewhere else.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't change anything
Okay.
from this concept that we did in the town from several years. I just brought this so you all had an idea of what's going on.
Okay.
So what are your ideas on what the next 180 days, what would be accomplished?
So, you know, Robert is ready to, this is back on his radar, Robert, the applicant. So we'll definitely be submitting to the DEC for sewer main extension. This has 2 applications to the Department of Health. One is for realty subdivision approval. They're just really looking at the lots, making sure you have adequate water and sewer. And then the water main extension. The water main extension, we're pondering maybe doing it in 2 steps, 2 phases. And that kind of helps with the timing of things on several fronts. So you're allowed to have up to 20 lots on a single point of access in the village. Happens to also be a town regulation. And with our pressure, I'm gonna just, you know, we roughly have adequate pressure, let's say to here,
Without a
from the
booster.
existing water main in Woodside. So preliminarily, we're thinking about making the application in 2 phases, with phase 1 being the lower portion of the site. So we don't have to wait for the village to have all of their funding and all of their, you know, infrastructure, the tower in place before Robert can break ground on this. And then there'd be a section 2. Maybe. But I think we're probably heading in that direction. So if that's the case, we'd have to come back to your board when we're kind of done and ask for what's called a sectionalizing plan. It's allowed by the state, it's a recognized thing. Every section has to be at least 10% of the total. And that's it, we can go ahead and file a map. And now, do I think we're gonna be done in 6 months?
No.
No.
Well, I'll be back again.
Right.
How many extensions have we given you, and how many are we allowed to give you?
So just to put this into perspective, the
Yeah.
original Village View,
Yeah.
the original 28 lots, it was not a cluster, I believe was approved in 2011. And I got extensions every 90 days. So I was a regular here, just for that. And that stayed in effect until the board granted final approval on this, just until last year. So I don't know what that is. It's what, 13 years times 4 a year. So over 50. But on this application, you've only granted 1 so far. We had the initial one, and then we were here 6 months ago asking for a 6-month extension, I believe.
Is that, that work?
It can go as long as the code allows or permits.
Yeah.
There's no stipulations that prohibit a number of extensions, but, I mean, there's other applications in the town of Warwick that have been prolonged for just as long as this project has, so
Okay.
it's unfortunately common, but as the market drives up, contractors reevaluate and see that there's a financial gain, that they'll come back.
Any more questions, concerns, comments? Would somebody like to make a motion for a 180-day extension?
Based on those comments, I'll make a motion for 180-day extension to Village View Estates.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Actually, you have to do a roll for this one. It's set up.
Trustee Gallo,
Yes.
Brian Barber,
Yeah.
Carrie Boland,
Yes.
Scott Brown,
Yes.
Bill Olson.
Bill's like that. Let the record reflect. Joke.
Do you want this?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I did. I want one of those. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Go on, Pete.
Take care.
So that is all the applications on the agenda. We do have a couple other items. There's number 5, right, which is kind of a discussion item. It's from the village board, request presumably to review and
Yes, so,
add or
so,
have comments on any.
yes, so you were all to review the, short-term rentals that I had given you. And then I've been requested for the planning board, I have to drop a letter by October 16th to the village board to submit to RENA.
So if there's any questions or comments,
Right, that I could drop the letter and Jesse could sign it.
and if there's none,
And if there's none, then
there would be none.
there would be none.
Right.
Be one sentence letter.
There would be,
Right.
right.
So I guess collectively, I don't know if everybody's had time to review or
Yeah,
have any
reading,
initial
reading
thoughts?
through that proposed law, though, it's, I was trying to imagine how that impacts us as a board.
So this is a little unusual, because this short-term rental is not within your zoning code. So if it was an amendment to the zoning code by statute, by or by ordinance, excuse me, you would have a review and comment period on that, and the village board couldn't proceed without your comments. This is a courtesy hey, heads up, they're soliciting, essentially it's a way of soliciting additional comment, informally, which you can, provide review, and no comment, you can provide your comment, it's, the range of what the board, but this is very much an optional comment period. So, I did go through it, if, I'll let the board go, but if you want my 2 cents, I'm happy to chime in.
Sure. Please
Yeah.
share.
How about 3 cents?
I have had to enforce these a couple of times in different jurisdictions, so a couple of things that just came to mind. So looking at 115.3, the regulation of short-term rentals, does the owner have to be present during the occupancy? It lists owner-occupied properties. In many instances, the owner lives there and then on weekends they're away, or if they go on vacation, sometimes if they're snowbirds, their primary residence is here, but and it's owner-occupied, but the question is, do they have to be there? So that should be clarified in the law. And then I was just curious, there was a distinction between residential properties and then properties within the central business zone. It didn't jump off readily why that distinction was made. There are more units in the central business district, and often there are units above storefronts and things like that. So I'm assuming that's what it is. They might articulate it a little bit better. Number 6, homeowner association policies and developments within the village shall supersede short-term rental provisions herein. provided that the homeowner association policies are more restrictive than the terms hereof. We actually have this in the town of Chester, and we just came across this. Their short-term rental actually requires the property owner to get the consent of the HOA. And there's a letter of consent. So the village board might consider a letter of consent. You are buying in a restricted community, whether that complies with your bylaws. Often, for example, Homestead Village, if you're gonna rent it out, you have to tell them you're renting it out and to whom you're renting it out and provide that information. Others, you have to provide a copy of the lease, so that they know who's living and occupying in the unit. So they might consider a provision like that. That may be overly restrictive because sometimes the HOA, no, you can't do that, and people in HOAs may not be able to do that, but that's something that the board should consider. And those, I think, were my primary comments. The biggest issue with short-term rentals is anytime you add a regulation, it increases costs to manage that. So if you add a layer of permitting, someone's got to be there to inspect, issue the permits, all of that, and often the board has to make a business decision whether the purpose of the permitting offsets the cost and the effort in the permitting. So this has a once-a-year renewal, so that's a fairly intensive permitting process, and the board should just consider that as part of its deliberations.
Who issues the permit? The village clerk?
Building department.
Building department.
We will.
And what was the cost of the permit? I didn't.
I think that would be established by fee schedule.
Okay, so that would have to be taken into consideration as the amount of efforts involved in this.
Right. Timing and staffing, and all of that. And sometimes it's worth it, the whatever's being prevented or regulated, it's a business decision. It's more important to regulate that, and the village is prepared to invest those resources into that regulation. Other times, it may not necessarily justify the cost. So that's a business decision for the village board.
So, it seems that a lot of the things in here are based on what you can imagine could go wrong if somebody, like, there's a lot of noise or there's 20 people. What if there's something that we haven't thought of or hadn't been addressed? Can that be added at a later date or?
They can always amend the code. I can tell you that the town of Warwick has gone through several iterations of their rental permits based on you can't draft for every, and I've had personal experience with this.
Yeah.
You draft what you think is a beautiful law, and somebody comes in with an application that gets right around, and you're like, oh shoot, they, and you're like, that's not what we intended, and so you then have to.
Yes,
So
that's what I was wondering.
right.
So this won't be the first version.
Okay, so
Or
it's a
not the
normal
last version,
process
yes, it is the first version.
that amendments
It
could come down
it
the line.
is, you try your best in good faith to come up with a reasonable plan, and you the expression you learn from your mistakes, it's not necessarily that you made a mistake, it just, you learn from all of a sudden, you're like, oh, what do you mean for that to happen? And you would have no idea that could happen. And people get clever when they wanna do, they, okay, you won't let me have that, but it doesn't say anything about this thing over here, and they'll figure out a way, so,
So the permit requirement goes to the building inspector?
yes,
There's no requirement that we would ever see
no.
those unless an applicant comes in with a site plan and says this is an intended use.
Right.
That'd be an accessory use, I guess. wouldn't
Yeah,
it?
that's
Yep.
different
Yeah.
permit, that's an accessory to ADU.
Mhm.
It's a different code, and it's a conditional use permit.
And again, the short-term rental, let's just take for example, a single-family house. The short-term rental, even though it's short-term occupancy, it's still functioning as a single-family house. Now, if, somebody's turning this into a B&B, then perhaps they do need site plan approval because they're coming in, because they won't meet the definition of a
Or a
hotel.
or a single family or a duplex, I think it says,
Right.
right? So,
Right.
yeah.
So if they were trying to increase the unit count, so if they were trying to convert a single-family residence to a two-family, to have two Airbnbs, then they would submit for a site
We
plan.
would need to see that.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And once they went over the duplex, they would need to go to your B and B, you know, your B and B hotel type use to get that accomplished if they wanted, you know.
Right.
And you do have some very big old houses that could be converted into that, but those would have to go through a site plan because that's becomes a commercial use.
This applies also, like, if somebody wants to rent their house, and they go to, like, say, a real estate agency, and they rent their house for 6 months or something.
Well, this would not apply, so short-term rental is generally defined as anything under 30 days.
30 days,
So
okay.
if you have your house and you're gonna rent it out to a long-term tenant, and a long-term tenant is actually, anything, a month to month, so,
Anything over 30 days.
that's more than 30 days, that's a quote-unquote long-term tenant. So that would not trigger this provision.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So normal rental is just.
Correct.
Normal rentals
Unchanged.
is separate from
Sure.
listing it on Airbnb
Now, this
or
code-
Airbnb.
This code only regulates and requires registration of short-term rentals. Some codes regulate short-term rentals, but they also require registration of tenanted properties, you know, for appointment of agency for all rentals. This code doesn't go that far.
Right.
That's another whole question. Do you want that additional layer of, so. So for example, Village of Monroe, if you rent out your property, then you could be renting it out for 30, you're not allowed to rent it out for less than 30 days. If you rented it out for whatever period of time beyond 30 days, you have to register as a landlord. You have to have a registered agent in the village, or within a certain distance of the village, and they're you know, it's an annual or every other year inspection.
So what's the next step would be, like, if we reviewed again and we have some ideas or comments, we would send it to you, to Jesse?
Um,
You have to write this letter next
Yeah.
week. This is our time
We have a
for
week.
comments.
Yeah, this is
October
it.
16th seems so far
Well,
away.
that's
No,
Wednesday.
that's next week.
Okay, all right, I can do it.
Yeah.
Right, so
So,
I think the idea would be if you have any comments,
It was supposed
questions.
to be tonight.
Oh,
That's right.
okay,
How many
oh,
comments you gotta
That's
say?
the, Village board by October 16th.
I guess I would have, like, if, I guess I needed an assignment, because I was like, oh, okay, I'll read it, and I didn't understand the
Yeah.
assignment, I guess, so I
It's okay.
would.
So-
I'm just looking if there's more.
Elizabeth, question, is it,
Sure.
as far as, I guess for me, the timeline of them having to reapply every year was kind of the shocking part when I read over it. Is that something common that other villages and towns have, where every year they're having to reapply for these? Or is that, what's the
One
typical
year-
timeframe?
Typical, most of them is every year.
Okay.
You might go to every 2. The biggest benefit of and this goes for whether it's short-term or you're regulating all rentals, is the annual inspection. It's akin to a fire inspection. So it really keeps folks who are renting out their homes
Right.
on their, you know, keeps them to the, yes, they have to have their smoke detectors, you know, things like smoke
Sure.
detectors, fire extinguishers,
Chimneys.
ingress, egress, and, you know, sometimes absentee landlords can be a problem and, you know, oh, that smoke detector's not working, or, oh, what carbon monoxide detector? So that I find is the biggest, because the people who are running a good, their homes are immaculate, they take care of them. The people that are not, there are other issues. And that it gives the building an inspector, because we can't just say for a standard single-family home, the building inspector can't just knock on the door and say, let me see your house. But if you're receiving the benefit of a permit,
Right.
the inspection is part and parcel of the permit. So if you want your permit, you have to allow the inspection. It gives us an opportunity to, because trust me, when there's fire and safety issues, there's usually other issues.
Sure. I love that it's a year, because in addition to that, I mean, we are trying to also not have 1,001 of these short-term, rentals. We actually want people that are living here to be community members. So, I think we should make it hard.
That can be in your letter.
And I love the idea of the consent if you're a part of a community.
Well, that's what-
I mean,
Oh, the HOA.
yeah, I think that
The
is
HOA
very
consent.
smart. I think that's smart.
That's up to you, that's up to you, whatever you want, I'll do, or do you want to write it, or do you want to write it, or do you want me to write it? That is up to.
You might wanna start, I'm happy to chime in, I'll let you start.
Yeah, I think we definitely would want the 3 comments that Liz brought up included in there.
Okay.
So are you able to write that?
Yeah,
Liz? Just a couple.
yeah, I can give Kristen a couple, I'll give you a couple bullet points via email.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you
Okay.
can copy and paste.
Okay, perfect.
And then if anybody else has any, I guess, get them in tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
I'll say right
then-
now, I don't
but
have
this
anything to add.
Okay.
I don't see how.
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah, I don't see
I
any
don't
real
think you should
impact on the
email
board.
me the comments, because then all of you collectively don't know what each other is saying. I think you have to agree upon what this letter is going to say.
Yeah.
So all of you should say now at the meeting how you feel and what you want in the letter.
Well, it
It's either
seems
that or-
useful to have the attorney's comments go to the board so that they can consider that.
Well, I
If
definitely-
these are
those
just
need to be-
suggestions
Okay,
anyway,
done,
right?
done.
Yeah.
Well, I can get you Kristen my comments, so that's
Okay.
not a big deal.
I guess my comment would be then about flexibility of adding and amending new restrictions or as they arise. Or if something is too restrictive, seeing if that's a
You
repeated
can-
comment.
And it's not uncommon, the board should evaluate the short-term rental scheme fairly regularly,
Really?
every year or two.
You want them to, flexibility to add new.
But
Not
they
To
have
review
anyway.
the.
To evaluate.
Evaluate
Yeah.
and review.
Unfortunately, the local law is a statutory process, so they can't just do it by
Yeah.
resolution, it has to go through a statutory process, but that they shouldn't just adopt it and put blinder, their problems will surface and they'll identify those problems. We may have no clue what those problems are now.
Exactly.
Okay. No?
I'm gonna abstain from,
I'm happy.
Okay.
I don't know if I have conflict of interest, 'cause I technically have a long-term rental, so if I should.
That's not an Airbnb, it's.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
short-term
different.
rental.
Okay.
It's not-
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
A
I
short-term
just wanna make
rental
sure to
is-
be
Short-term
transparent
is
about that, I
under
do.
30.
It's
Under
under
So I've heard
I
of
don't
these.
have an intent
It's
of,
called
no.
an STR, short-term rental.
Yeah.
Under
Short-term
30 days.
Under 30 days.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, Bill,
I'm happy with the comments.
Yep.
okay,
I agree.
Jesse,
Same.
yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah, I
Do you
agree
want
with your
any-
points.
Do you want to add anything?
Well, if the standard is right now to have things reviewed every year for permits, I think that's good. I want
Okay.
to keep that.
And I don't know if this is the right thing, but for, as far as the fee schedule, once it's established, that if it's perhaps, I mean, I don't know how much the permit would be, but to take into consideration if somebody is a senior citizen and renting out space
That's
versus,
an idea.
you know, I mean, not to,
You do have to be careful of
Ageist.
equal
Right.
protection type things.
Oh.
yeah.
And classifications. I know the town has a escalating scale. The first one's expensive, the second one is really expensive. So if you have to discourage folks from,
Having
building up
multiple
their arsenal of
units.
10.
Right.
And I think they cap it too, but your second one is really expensive.
Yeah.
Second one in the same building,
No, second one in the same, under the
Town.
same ownership.
of same ownership.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alright, any other
I would
comments?
just reflect on that one. Okay.
Do we have to say anything about whether or not the owner should be on premise, like?
They
those-
have a
That's
section
already
in
in
there
there.
that
Okay.
says that.
That's already in there.
Yes,
Good.
Or representative.
yes,
Well,
or a representative that
representative.
lives 30
Yeah,
minutes
30.
away.
That's great.
Yep.
That's really important.
I think so, for
Yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
Get an Airbnb.
Okay, so
I think other than
the one
Liz's, it
comment,
was-
those Liz's comments,
Yep.
so do you want to, after Liz's comments, I will write the letter and send it to you for signature?
Yeah.
Because, can you come visit me
Sure.
tomorrow for the next thing, because I have other things for you to do?
Sure.
I think she's asking if she's telling.
No, never,
So that resolves that.
yes.
Keith, did you have anything?
There's nothing engineering related.
Yeah, I know.
Are we going to adjourn the meeting and then do the discussion?
I
You're
don't
not
know
supposed
if
to,
we
right?
can do that. I think we
No,
have to
we
have
can
discussion.
To do the discussion and adjourn.
Yeah.
Yeah, discussion.
I don't know. We don't have to do it in this order.
Okay.
So if there's a, I mean, we should probably do the ZBA since we discussed that recently with the application. Yeah, we've seen in the previous couple of applications that have come in front of us for even some minor additions to houses. There is an issue with the zoning code that only allows them to have a 6-month, I think, approval and to get their.
So there's two, actually there's three issues that I see. So the first one is the timing of the approval. So right now the code just says 6 months, does not provide an extension period.
Right.
I certainly recommend that the zoning code be amended to give flexibility where warranted. The applicant has to make a showing, hey, this is why I haven't started. And often 6 months is a short time period in construction world. So I would certainly say reasonable extensions. I have spoken with Ashley Torre, who's the ZBA's attorney, about starting the time period when the ZBA, or for example, when the planning board gives approval. So if a ZBA extension, a ZBA variance is 6 months, one, there should be a flexibility that the ZBA can grant an extension on a letter request, just like we do, but also that it wouldn't start until we grant site plan approval, because they can't act on that variance until we get site plan approval. So right now, the code doesn't say that, but we're effectively trying to do that. 6 months shall start to run upon signing, but we can certainly incorporate those requests that the village board consider that in any code change. So that's issue one, is the timing. The second issue which we've had is and particularly on the variance with site plan, is everybody has gotten a double public hearing by your code. I'll let Keith chime in here. From my experience, it is relatively rare that a single-family home, even with variances, comes to the planning board for site plan approval. So an existing, single-family home, and so what I would suggest is that the village board evaluate whether that was still appropriate. Now, some villages want to keep fairly tight control, so they require site plan approval. If you eliminate site plan approval, that eliminates the double hearing, and they would only have their ZBA hearing. Another possibility is, in many codes, there is a waiver provision that the village planning board can waive a public, in certain instances, the village board can waive a public hearing. In our case, we can only, the only waiver that I see is an evaluation of amendments. So if we receive an amendment to a site plan, we can say, yes, this is a really small amendment, no, we don't need a public hearing. Or this is a big amendment, we should have a public hearing. That's really the only waiver I've identified in your code. So you might consider a waiver, because again, these are very small, 21 Woodside, Campbell, Poplar, all the same type of application. Pre-existing lots, we have lots of small pre-existing lots, small,
Non-conforming lots.
non-conformity. So that would be another area where we just give us the flexibility to waive it. Particularly in some of these, I think on some of our ZBAs, we've had property owners hold 2 no-show public hearings where not a single soul came.
And then between the approval from the ZBA to ours, they're 4 months
Right.
in, and then they're now put up against maybe a month or two to even get a
Correct.
building permit and get substantially underway, or whatever the
Correct.
terminology is. So it is a hardship, I think.
So it's really a, you know, a business decision for the village board. How much control do they wanna have on those types of applications? But again, most times for existing lots, now subdivision, new subdivision incoming, their subdivision site plan approval, that's a completely different story. But on new, existing lots where you're adding to an existing single-family house, you know, site plan can be viewed as overkill. Not necessarily, but can be.
And I think to Liz's point, affording the board the ability to waive it gives you the opportunity to have a public hearing if you deem it necessary.
Right.
But
You can waive
also, given the severity of the, you know, variances that they sought, they've already had a public hearing in the ZBA. So you can take that into consideration and help evaluate if another public hearing would be warranted.
Right.
Also, another point of contention is with the new short-term rental code going into effect, you may be getting more site plan applications or modifications to existing buildings to expand or add additional units. So I'm sure there will be an influx of additional applications once the short-term code goes into effect. But again, you would then have the ability to waive that if deemed necessary.
Right. Okay.
Could we waive it even if there was a significant number of comments? Can we still waive it even? at the ZBA?
It would, so, let's take, for example, 9 Campbell. There, I don't know, I don't wanna say
No.
significant, but there were some
There was some
comments back
comments,
and
right.
forth with the board, and the applicant made
Right.
modifications as part of the ZBA approval.
Mhm.
And then those folks came here and said, this is great.
Yeah, okay.
So, I think, I don't wanna say, you know, pigeonhole yourself into, there was nobody,
Right. No.
whether
comments.
substantial comments, I think you have to look at each application in the totality of that application and what took place. They may have already hashed out the issue, and you've got neighbors now getting notices twice
Right.
when they've already hashed out all the
Yeah.
issues before one board.
I think that it's a really important part of the process because we can't predict, like, oh, who's gonna show up for this? We don't know. And by waiving it and not giving anybody the opportunity to have something to say when they were waiting for that moment. Though I wonder if it would be possible, I think somebody mentioned it earlier, about combining public hearing efforts, like.
You can hold a public hearing, given the quantity of what I've seen so far, that gets complicated. One, because we need another space, because we can't physically, we've now got 2 boards, and we only have 1 table. So we would have to find alternate space, but that, we certainly can use the town, timing wise, trying to get,
Everybody.
10 people in a, trying to get a quorum of both boards in a room, is challenging. Now, the other thing you can do, but it adds time, if you want to do that, and you just, again, this would probably require a code amendment. In many instances for site plan, the applicant comes to us first. We would declare our intent to be lead agency, conduct a coordinated review. That doesn't necessarily solve the 2 public hearings, but we would do our seeker review, and the ZBA would rely on our seeker review before making a final determination. That can be, it depends on the nature of the application.
Right.
Most times, area variances in and of themselves are type 2 actions, so they are not subject to environmental review. Sometimes the larger project, yes, that area variance piece is not subject to environmental review, but the larger project is. For most of these residential, that's not really an issue because they're both type 2. You know, our part is type 2, the ZBA's part is type 2. When they're different and the ZBA is, well, like, this is a little type 2 issue, you may want to do a coordinated review to bring that under either your unlisted action as part of your site plan review.
Carrie, I appreciate your comments. I'm trying to imagine a situation where we would mistakenly waive a public hearing. It seems to me that the cases that we've seen are pretty clear cut in that if we were gonna waive it, it would be based on circumstances where we can look at the application, we know there was a ZBA hearing that nobody showed up, or that there were questions that were resolved, that we can see on the plan.
We're on the inside though, in that we attend all the meetings and we read all the documents.
Yep.
For somebody whose neighbor might be considering something and is completely unaware of it, that public hearing notice might be the first time that they're aware that something's happening. And that's great, and if there is an issue, that's our only opportunity to find out what it is.
Well, they should be getting, the
They would get the
ZBA
ZBA one
gets the
too,
same
though, right?
notice, so
Yeah.
they should be getting the ZBA notice.
The
They
issue
may-
is it's redundant.
Yes.
I'm trying to
Does-
think for Campbell, do we get a ZBA notification? I don't know. I know we got one for the public hearing here, but I don't think we got one for the,
ZBA?
we did? We did get one? Okay.
We should have.
I'm just remembering.
Well, I know
Was there a
for
difference of the
15,
distances for the notices?
I think the
it
ZBA
was
is actually
sent out
better.
very
I think
last
it's
minute,
500.
and I didn't get it in time, and then I got the second one in time,
Yeah.
so something with that.
I think if we have the flexibility, then I feel like, I hear what you're saying. At least it enables us to not slow down the process.
Right, but I don't want it to be at the expense, and also I don't want to be in the decision making, like, oh, we waive yours, we're not waiving yours though, we'll waive yours, that, yeah, no. I don't want to be perceived as a board that,
Is biased.
that waives things based on,
Popular.
What
or
you're, sug-
ether or
what you're
something.
suggesting is we be consistent.
Absolutely,
Just
all,
leave it
all
the
times,
same.
same rules for everybody at every turn.
Okay, good. But as Liz said, there's always little nooks and stuff.
Yeah, I
Is
know,
that-
and we know the
well,
nuances,
yeah.
because we hear them,
And
we're here,
The major issue here is it is hardship for a lot of applicants
Yeah.
that come to both boards
Yeah.
with the time constraint that's in place currently in the code.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what has to be resolved,
So-
is the fact that they have 6-month deadline, from their approval of the ZBA to essentially get substantially complete. 6
Now,
months.
if it's a special use permit or a conditional use permit, you must hold a public hearing. That's a
Right.
state law issue. Site plan,
Okay.
you do not, the zoning regulations, we get our authority from state law, which authorizes the village board to adopt a zoning code.
Right.
State law has certain requirements that you have to, so for special use permits, you must have a public hearing, whether your code says it or not. Site plan does not, so if the site plan regulations do not at state law. So if here your code says the planning board shall schedule a public hearing, right? That's what's in your code. If that wasn't there, then again, you have that kind of, and you can always, the nature of the application, this is the minimum. You can always schedule more. You can always hold open a public hearing. You can always require a public hearing. So let me I'm getting to the ZBA.
The village board approves special use permits.
Not all of,
Yes, don't they? I think all special use permits,
But
in the
you can't
town,
take-
it's not the case.
You-
In the
I know
town,
the village
planning-
has on
the
some.
planning board in the town, but here, the special use permits are all a village board issue. Whether they should be, that's another question.
That's a
Most-
business decision for the
Most
board.
people don't think they should be, but
Right, but it sounds like
that's not an issue for
we're,
now.
we're working with the ZBA currently to address this sort of difficult.
So we're kind of bridging the gap. Both Ashley Torre and I have recommended that the zoning code be amended, one, to allow extensions and provide that flexibility.
Okay.
And also language that it doesn't start to run until
That makes
all the
perfect
boards
sense.
have made their decisions.
Sure.
That's
That's
yeah,
common.
that's a no-brainer, I think. So is that been formally transmitted to the
So
village
that's what
board?
the next question is, because that has to be, the code has to be changed.
Correct.
So,
So our board would, and I
Rick
can certainly
would-
draft a letter,
Mhm.
our board could, and it's always your prerogative to make a request, the
Yep.
board doesn't have to act on it, you would send a letter. Dear Village Board, upon review of several applications, we draw to your attention that these things should be changed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can do that for anything that comes up. Hey board, we found a typo in the code, you might wanna change that. The board can then decide how they process it. I know right now, they're working on a larger rezoning, whether they incorporate that as part of their larger rezoning efforts, or if, because of the nature of it, they adopt a more simplistic local law to fix that, and I defer to the village board and their council on that. They could do it either way.
Well, I'd like
And-
to move forward on that.
Okay,
sooner
and to
than
answer
later.
your question, the notice is the same, it's 300 feet for ZBA and site plan.
I think we should put in there with both the option though, too, that the clock doesn't start, and that's something, you know, I'd expressed an issue over this clock that starts back then, but also we should put a provision in there where if, and it gives us the ability to waive that if we feel, if, you know, because in essence, there has been some situations where we do have the redundancy, but that should be made on a case by case. Both of the things should be kind of put together and handed over. This way, it's something that you can look at and go case by case, you know, you can see the comments, you can see what's going on. Something where it's, you know, a small change and there is, you know, it's nominal, and there's no types of,
I feel bad for
you know,
them.
conflict.
So I just wanna, read, cause, Ashley and I had some back and forth. This was an email we had, and Boris was on it. I would suggest that the village board considering amending, section 145-152L. The following is from the village of Woodbury and seems to work well. Expiration, this is the language she's suggesting. Expiration, unless otherwise specified, any order or decision of the board for a permitted use shall expire if a building or occupancy permit for the use is not obtained by the applicant within 180 days of the date of the decision. Should the proposal also require approval from the Village of Woodbury Planning Board, the 180-day expiration window shall run from the date of final planning board approval. In all cases, the board may extend this time for one additional period of 90 days if such extension is warranted by the particular circumstance. And then she adds some things, so I can share that with Kristen as well. So, with respect to variances, they're getting special treatment, effectively they're getting special treatment under the code, which is why you don't give tons and tons, you don't see variances carry on like site plan, like we just had, you know, where they came in every 90 days for an extension, that, you don't see that, because you're getting special approval under your code, either use it or lose it.
All right.
So I can put something together and circulate that to everybody,
Yeah.
take a look
Yeah,
at.
we do. We have floodplain administrator on here. I think this has been a discussion topic that we've tabled a few times based on the survey that we were submitted, I guess, or sent to us from FEMA. Was it FEMA?
Yes.
FEMA survey. And I know we've had some discussion of whether we should remain the floodplain administrators, or suggest maybe that those decisions go elsewhere within the village. And I know both Liz and Keith have provided some information on what some other municipalities do. Pros and cons, I guess. We've had one here with this recent, or today's application, obviously. Kind of see it almost like I don't want to say hybrid approach, but it does help to have this discussion because you're here and then you add, you know, engineering specific comments. Whereas if it does solely just go, for instance, to like the building inspector, I don't know how much he has that ability.
So he would have so other municipalities typically designate the building inspector unless they have an engineer on staff,
Right.
you know, specifically. So like the city of Newburgh has their own engineering staff, so they can designate them to be the floodplain administrator. So for most municipalities, it is the building inspector, as they're the most well-versed in building and structures and so forth. So it does kind of fall onto their shoulders. It does alleviate the fact that they would have to present a plan to the planning board to, you know, seek a fill in a floodplain or any kind of floodplain modification. the board doesn't get the ability to kind of weigh in if they're not considered the administrator. So for that specific application, you know, it's relatively minor, so I don't know if it's something that the board would even want to be involved in. But being that it may, that if the building inspector is the floodplain administrator, they still have the village engineer to also lean on to help, you know, seek additional input. There are other, I know FEMA does help or try to reach out and help kind of provide insight to those floodplain administrators for training and other, and that's what kind of what the survey was alluding to. So having one specific person who would be well versed for the municipality is not a bad idea.
Right.
Especially if they're, typically when you're having a floodplain permit, it's usually tied into a building permit. So if you do a major modification to a building in a floodplain, if it's half the value of the building or the structure, you do need to, that's considered a new application. So you can't just say, I'm gonna hold 3 walls and I'm gonna, you know, renovate 90% of the building and not have to seek floodplain or the new codes and regulations. So in those instances, the application would have to come back to the planning board for them to, or for you guys to review and approve prior to that Boris being able to issue a building permit. So, you know, there is some redundancy having that there, but, you know, that's the board's determination if they feel be obligated to review.
Does this make a lot more work for the building inspector, who's already, I know pretty well,
It depends on how much projects you would have.
How many
I
of
mean,
them?
since this has been brought to attention, I mean, I don't know how many applications have, usually it's, a floodplain application is for, you know, a modification or a development of a vacant property. The board would be, you know, already kind of included into reviewing. But for this application today, was the only modification was just the modification to the floodplain itself. So
Right, but
prior to that, I don't know how many other applications there's been before the board that even was inclusive with a site plan.
I think there
We
were.
had one, the one by Larry's Deli, remember?
Yeah.
It was, right, that was right before I came, so I'd say I've
Right
been
when I
here a
came.
year, so we
Yeah.
had
And I think we
one.
had one, now this
this
maybe
year.
before many other people, the storage batteries behind the,
Bus garage.
yeah. They're right on the floodplain.
Yep. So there are applications,
Yeah.
but they're not, so you're, I mean, we've cited 3 so far, so.
I'd say
you
within
know,
the last roughly 10 years, there might have been 5.
Yeah, so you're talking 3 additional applications that the building inspector would have to review, you know, either coordinated, or just
And
in-house.
Usually, the village board can authorize, the building inspector to rely on, not to give Keith more work, but, can authorize the building inspector to refer out the review
Right.
to a licensed engineer or, you know, to do the actual review part, get the memo, and that's very, very common where villages rely on outside engineering services to do that. So, this is, not that I have a large quantity, but this is you're the only planning board I've got that is the floodplain administrator.
And that was, the catalyst was that survey and the fact that the bulk of it, I mean, we couldn't
All
respond to.
my other municipalities, and I don't wanna speak for Keith, all my other municipalities, the building inspector or
Right.
the engineer is the floodplain administrator.
Now, obviously, the code would then have to be amended.
Correct.
Because currently has the
Correct.
planning board as the administrator, and it also requires a public hearing. Or we have the ability to waive, I guess, a public hearing, because we did, right?
Yeah.
For the floodplain administrator?
You had the ability to waive it, I believe, but I think the board had a vote on to declare, or to hold the public hearing for that last application.
That wasn't, we treated that as an amended site, because it
Oh,
came
'cause
in
it
as a
was-
site
oh,
plan,
right.
it was
That's why.
amended site
Okay.
plan.
So there
If
isn't.
it comes into us as a site plan for purposes of flood permit,
Then it would,
then it has to have a public hearing. Now, most times, it's gonna trigger a site plan, so you're gonna see it anyway. So like, again, going to Monroe, our approval resolution says subject to floodplain permit pursuant to section da-da-da-da-da, and that's a condition of approval, that's a condition of approval.
Mhm.
So they have to provide that information.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of best practice. If every other town does it that way and you've had a success, I feel like it makes sense.
Yeah,
It's
for
more of
me,
a
it's-
it's more of a
yeah.
technical expertise.
Right.
But I also think if the village is gonna change that, I think having a hard look at the entire
Of course.
floodplain, because there are other regulations that have been changing, so now HUD is requiring that all buildings are 2 foot above the floodplain, so there may be something for the village to incorporate and say, now we want 3 feet to help kind of
Stay
be on the forefront of changes to the floodplain requirements.
What does this mean? Let's tell me what this means. I have.
So this is
You
writing
want
another letter.
You
Well-
want me to write a letter to the village board suggesting that we change the code so you're not the floodplain
Well,
administrator
I think what you
anymore?
do is one letter, go and highlight the ZBA change, the ZBA changes we discussed, floodplain.
And
That's okay,
and
give me a
the-
multi-page letter.
Multi-page letter, and
It's just
okay,
paper, it won't
so
kill you.
you just, a multi-page letter.
I'll draft it.
Okay, good.
You're not getting it, you're not getting that tomorrow.
Alright, so those were 2 items that have been hanging on for a while. And the last one is just something for really, I think, Liz and Keith and
Yes, so we could get a code, a
Procedure.
rhythm, a procedure going
Yeah.
of what we're going to do, and I did discuss a little bit with the 3 of you what we're going to do going forward when Jesse has to sign the site plans. So what we came to was that I will get the revised plans from the applicant. I will forward that to Keith. Keith will review it, and if he says yes, the applicant will print out the paper copies, and the PDF will be approved, and Keith will issue a letter that you sign the site plan, that you're authorized, the site
right.
plan is good, you can come sign it.
Right.
But then your piece, we
Just
have
copy
to,
me on Keith's email.
okay, and then you're going,
Then
what
I'll
are we doing with your letter? Though, are you going to send me a letter? Because you can't say all fees have been paid. I won't have all the fees paid. That's what that was the
Right.
one
We,
piece. of
yeah,
this.
so what I suggest there, and I get it, there's always a little trailing piece.
Yeah,
What I would suggest is that, and I can make sure my resolutions are more clear, if the applicant's escrow is funded where it should be and there's a reasonable amount of money and all the application fees are paid, go ahead and sign it.
Okay.
But if the applicant owes us 10 grand, we're not signing the site plan until the escrow's been brought up. They
Okay.
shouldn't even be on the agenda under our
Yeah.
code.
that's not
Um,
happened so far this year.
So, because once we sign the plan, we kind of lose that stick. So I'm really looking for, they're up to date and there's not, a huge amount floating. You're gonna get that little trickle of, a small bill, after the fact. It still remains a condition, so even after they've signed, even after the chair has signed the plan, if that final bill doesn't get paid, they still owe that bill. So,
And if there's escrow still available, then, I
Right.
mean, the last bills between the 2 of us should not be significant enough that would or deplete the entire escrow account. So,
Exactly. I'll just make sure there's enough in there based on your previous
Yeah.
yeah.
bills. I'll
And
be
you can
able
always
to
send us,
see.
you can always,
I could
send
always
us an
tell-
email.
Yeah, and I can
and-
always
and-
say to the applicant, you need to give me more money if they have $200 in there, say. Are you, is that good?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we
Okay,
Yeah.
good, so that's what we're going to do.
Yep.
Okay.
alright, that was it.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
That was fast.
All in favor?
Aye.
I
Well, thank you.
Highly productive.
Very,
Chairman said
yes,
that's it.
we're still recording. I have not turned off yet. The meeting is still live, so hold on.
Rude, was it?
No,
No?
So it
appreciate
wasn't
it.
15, that we got, it was the 9 candle,
We're off.
I didn't get the ZBA
We're
notification.
off
I
the,
think I did it.
Are we out?
I'm just doing
I know I
it
was
right
told
now.
when I called, oh, it was sensitive.